Hello, and welcome to BSB Must Reads, where we tell you what you must be reading. I'm Sandy Lowe, Bold Strokes Books Senior Editor, and I have with me today debut author Catherine Young. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, nice to be here.
How's it going? What's it like being a debut author? With today, your book is out in the world for the first time. Day one. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Did you throw up? Did you sleep last night? Tell me everything.
Oh, it's very exciting. It's almost a little like hurry up and wait because the art copies went out, and so I've gotten like 5 reviews, which is incredibly exciting. And now I know the book is out, but obviously no one has had time to actually buy or read it yet. So it's like incredibly exciting and then waiting.
Come on, you guys, hurry up. We want to hear what you think. Awesome. I love it. So as none of our readers have met you yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your new book, Love and Duty, and I would love to hear you read.
I'm a complete literary nerd. I hold a I have a undergrad in English. I've always loved books, and I always wanted to be a writer. It just took me a while to get around to it. But during the pandemic, I started the first draft of Love and Duty. And unlike many drafts before, which I either never finished or never edited, I actually finished this one and finally worked up the nerve to send it to a publisher. And lo and behold, Bold Strokes Books actually took it. So I'm incredibly happy about that. I am still kind of in shock. I've got a real physical book. As you can see here, it actually exists. It's on paper. It's got like a glossy cover and everything. So to give you a general overview of the book, it's about a princess called Rosalie, and she lives on a planet called Delphi. So this is very kind of, you know, space opera. Although I like to joke that it's a little like kind of War and Peace in space, because a lot of the core of the novel focuses around the interpersonal relationships with the characters. And so Princess Rosalie, she's the heir of the Delphian Empire, and she has three lovers: Lady Swan, General Tate, and Julia Veritas. But she's also just become engaged to Princess Lucia of Calliope as part of a defense treaty between the two planets. So I'm going to read starting from the first chapter, which is actually the last chapter I wrote, because the original introduction didn't quite set the characters up very well. So to give you a sense of where we're beginning, Rosalie has just learned that she's engaged to Princess Lucia, who's the princess from another planet. She's never met her before. And she's been told this right before she's about to walk into a ball. So let me get started. Princess Rosalie entered the Armistice Ball with her personal assistant at her side and two guards at her back. From the top of the staircase, she could see the entire imperial ballroom, from the three huge crystal chandeliers on the vaulted ceiling to the great glass windows looking up into the palace gardens. The smell of floral polish, perfume, and too many people pressed together on a warm evening wafted over her. The crowd fell silent at her appearance, and the orchestra struck up something suitably majestic for her descent of the curving staircase. Rosalie did not feel majestic. She felt like several hundred Delphian nobles and a good number of foreign dignitaries were staring at her impatiently. None of them could dance until she opened the ball with the first waltz. Her thoughts were a whirl, and it took every ounce of her self-control to keep her smile in place. Why the hell had her mother thought it was a good idea to tell her about the engagement right before she had to make a public appearance? As the heir apparent to the Delphian Empire, Rosalie had always known it was her duty to marry as many times as needed to build alliances for the crown. But why did her first marriage have to be to some Calliopean princess she never even met? Surely there were other ways to secure a treaty between two planets. She wanted to find her lovers and get their counsel, but there was no time. She needed to focus on the task at hand. And at the moment, that meant getting down the grand staircase without tripping over her ball gown. Her assistant, Meredith Cooper, leaned over to whisper, "Remember, during the dance, tell Ambassador Hanson exactly what your mother told you to pass on. Watch how she reacts. Try flirting and batting your eyelashes to keep her off guard." Batting my eyelashes? Rosalie paused briefly in her descent. Meredith was wearing a green dress with red poppies drawn on it around her skinny frame. which clashed with her red hair and was garish even by her unconventional approach to fashion. Meredith shrugged. It's what people do in books. Do you even understand how flirting works? No idea, but better you than me. Rosalie would have liked to glare at her, but they had reached the ballroom floor, and she had to continue alone. By custom, the first dance at the Armistice Ball must be between representatives of Delphi and Terra Nueva. Ambassador Hanson crossed the empty dance floor to her and bowed deeply. The suit was black in the Terra Nuevan style and stood out in strong contrast to the brighter colors and elaborate embroidery favored by the Delphians. The simplicity suited her, as did the short cut of her dark curls. Her face was forgettable, ordinary, but Rosalie knew from experience she could be unsettlingly charming. The ambassador bowed. May I have this dance, Your Highness? Rosalie offered her hand. I would be honored. The orchestra started the first waltz, and Ambassador Hanson drew her into the first steps. While Rosalie had no innate talent for dancing, countless girlhood lessons had left her competent enough to dance and converse at the same time. You look lovely tonight, Your Highness, said Ambassador Hanson. Thank you. I trust you are well? Yes. And your lovers, you've not added any new ones recently, have you? There was a hint of suggestion in Ambassador Hanson's tone that Rosalie didn't like. Ambassador Hanson always made it sound like there was something lurid in the tradition of Delphine royalty, publicly acknowledging lovers and having more than one. I am still with the same 3 paramours as last year and the year before. I've been told I've become a great disappointment to the gossip magazines. What about you? Now, you know I'm a married woman. And I'm sure you dutifully keep faith with your wife back on Terra Nueva. While marriage on Terra Nueva was traditionally monogamous, rumor had it that Ambassador Hanson had seduced several nobles and at least one actress during her time on Delphi. Ambassador Hanson said, in my own way. She pulled Rosalie uncomfortably close, as they termed. It wasn't the opening Rosalie had been hoping for, but she took advantage of the proximity. She smiled sweetly and whispered in the ambassador's ear, trying to channel at least a fraction of her mother's talent for intimidation. Enough of silly banter. We need to discuss where the Navy is setting up a base on the smallest moon of Jove in the neutral zone. The ambassador missed a step, and only Rosalie's hand on her arm kept them both upright. Had Rosalie had any doubts of the veracity of the information her mother's spies had passed on? She didn't anymore. She also knew for a fact that the ambassador was being kept abreast of Terra Nuevan naval movements. It took only a moment for the practiced stateswoman's face to return to a calm, neutral expression. She kept her voice to a whisper. Since they had the dance floor to themselves, and the music and ambient noise of the ballroom, there was little danger of being overheard or recorded. Your Highness, I do not know where you heard this unsubstantiated rumor, but there is no truth in it. We have photos. They didn't. Ambassador Hanson raised her right hand, guiding Rosalie into a turn. When they were facing again, she was grinning in a chilling way. You realize sending any kind of scouting ship or drone into the neutral zone is a treaty violation. Rosalie felt a sharp flicker of panic, but it was too late to go back now. She pushed her gambit. Funny, we have pictures of your scouting ships too. Perhaps we are both unclear on that point of the treaty. Tell me, Your Highness, exactly how good are these photos you claim to have? It would be a shame if you're making all this fuss over what could easily turn out to be a space pirate hideout. I have never taken you for a fool, Madame Ambassador. I will thank you to extend me the same courtesy. Covering a ship's serial number does not change its shape, and Terra Nuevan vessels are distinctive, unless you are suggesting you've lost 6 ships to pirates. The spies have been very specific about that detail. That earned her a slight inclination of Ambassador Hanson's head. No, I don't take you for that, even if you aren't half as canny as your mother. May I assume she has sent you as her proxy in this case? In an unofficial nature, which Rosalie hoped gave her the advantage. Within a month's time, my mother expects to be seeing photos of nothing more than a moon's rocky surface, and we can forget all about this unfortunate incident. You do realize I am only an ambassador. And I am a princess. We both speak for others. See it done, or the matter becomes public. As you have said, My mother is cannier than me. Do you want to face her across the table in an official negotiation with a treaty violation to hold against Terra Nueva? She may finally get back the disputed Hubble mining colony. Ambassador Hanson laughed. I much prefer your far more pleasing disposition. The last time I discussed the treaty with your mother, she called me a pompous proletariat idiot and somehow got me to agree to lift a tariff. She only used two adjectives worth of insults. From her, that is practically a compliment, said Rosalie. The song ended, the final chord fading. Do we have an understanding? Yes, Your Highness. Ambassador Hanson looked as if she might have wanted to say something else. She saw someone behind Rosalie and merely bowed and walked away.
That's awesome. I love it. What a great intro. I think my favorite line was, "We have photos." That's great. I feel like there's so many parallels to, recent politics that was thoroughly enjoyable. So tell us a little bit more about this world that you've created, because as you mentioned, it is a space opera. It's not the world as we know it. So what does it mean to be a Delphian in this context?
So it's one of several planets. It's kind of your classic, there was Earth, people have left. It's never quite explained in the novel why. There is civilization that's, about 1,000 years down the line or so, which is really fun as a writer because it means I can bring in stuff from Earth, Earth paintings or background or history, but I can have a slightly different civilization. Mm-hmm. So there's several planets. Delphi is a matriarchy. It has an empress. And they've got a few colonies. And the planet they primarily don't get along with is Terra Nueva, which is a little more egalitarian, but also a little kind of, the right word, not necessarily fascist, but there's not a lot of social freedom.
Okay.
And there's several other planets involved. Like there's Varsia, which is also a matriarchy, but it's a slightly less healthy or less functional society. And there's a planet they're closely allied with called Callio, which is a patriarchy, and has an emperor. And there's a few other planets. There's Sepia, which is more egalitarian, and there's Calypso, which is also more egalitarian. But the main players in the book are Terra Nueva, Delphi, and Callio.
I get the sense this is not going to be just one book.
No, I have this whole thing mapped out as terrifying. There are charts and many, many future space battles.
Awesome. All right, prepare yourselves for a series because there's a lot going on here. So I noticed in your reading, was a mention that some of these planets are more monogamous than others. And your story does feature a protagonist who has 3 lovers and then is married to a princess. Is that right? Princess? Or she's a princess?
Princess. She's also referred to an admiral in the book, but she uses both titles.
Okay. So what was it like writing a kind of a romance with all these like various players? It's not what we typically see, in like a girl meets girl and you have 2 central players. What kind of made it challenging or different to write this kind of polyamorous relationship?
I think it was keeping track of all the emotional beats. So the book isn't longer than a normal romance, but there's a lot more characters to kind of keep track of and remember where they are. So I think it meant I had to get a lot into every scene. Like if I need to show that a character's happy or sad or how the relationship is going, I had to get a lot in. But what I really loved about it was instead of just showing the traditional, arc of a romance, girl meets girl, start a relationship, get together, end. I could show Rosalie's 3 existing relationships where I could actually depict, relationships that have been going on for several years in a romance, where there's been time and intimacy and trust. And that was really a joy to write.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of get both sides of the coin. You get the new and the exciting and kind of all those new challenges that people face. But then you also get, like you said, the established relationships too. Awesome. So, okay. I'm dying to know if it works out with Princess Lucia. Does it work out? Come on, tell me now.
No, I'm not supposed to give spoilers, am I?
Come on. Do they hate each other? Do they fall in love with each other? Do they survive everyone wanting to kill them?
That's a definite hazard. The hilarious thing about this book too is I originally wanted to start them out as sort of, hate at first sight, kind of Beatrice Benedict, and that's actually not what you get in the book. By the second draft, they start at a much better footing.
Oh, I like that. So you thought of them in a particular way or started out that way. And then they kind of changed the plan on you, or do you feel like they evolved the more that you wrote their story? Who was driving this bus, Catherine?
Usually the characters. But yeah, it definitely, because you think of archetypes and outlines when you start writing something, and you actually try to write characters into a scene. And literally the first scene where Rosalie and Princess Lucia see each other, Lucia has just come down in a crashing space shuttle and like dragged an injured member of her crew to safety. And so I couldn't figure out any way they'd be terrible to each other in a scene where they're both in crisis.
Hmm.
So they ended up kind of being more dignified and helpful, and kind of focusing more on the challenges at hand than fighting, and building the relationship sort of more slowly through. While they're both very standoffish at the beginning, they're also still very intelligent and competent people, who treat other people decently.
Yeah, sure. I mean, always good traits, right? In people and in characters. And awesome meet cute. I love that. I don't know that we've ever had a
I'm sure
literally
somewhere in
crashing.
sci-fi that must have been a scene like that.
Awesome. So you mentioned also in your intro that you wrote this book during the pandemic. What was it that made you like sit down one day and be like, today's the day that I'm gonna write a book? Was it, you mentioned that you'd had this interest in writing for a long time. Did you make like one decision, like, okay, I'm finally gonna do this? Or was it like inch by inch over a long time?
It was very gradual. I mean, again, I'd always wanted to be a writer. And then somehow in the course of college and Peace Corps and grad school, just other stuff kept coming up. And so I'd always have short stories I'd finish, and I'd have drafts that I'd even finish. But by the time I'd finish them, I'd realize how much rewriting they needed, or I just could never quite work up the nerve. What changed during the pandemic was actually I started sharing some of my writing online with friends. So I had several friends who were reading Love and Duty as I was writing it. And that's really what maybe not made me finish it, but made me decide it was worth actually sitting down, editing it, getting it together, and then working up the nerve to actually try to get it published.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you got support
That makes the
from your
difference.
friends, and yeah, online community. I'm sure we have a lot of readers and writers who can empathize with that and have that same experience. So awesome to meet you. I hope everyone checks out Love and Duty, available right now and available everywhere else except the Boldstruck's website. So available right now at BSB and everywhere else September 13th. Thank you so much, Catherine, and we look forward to more in this series.
Yeah, I've started the sequel, so everyone keep your eyes out.
All right, we will. Thank you.